We asked for help. We sent our plea along the cold bones of the world, a long, slow pulse in the deep frequencies of pressure and stone. We sang it through the glacier that cradled us, across blue halls where the light fell like knives, across brine canals that carried our memory and our breath. We asked for the gentle ones, the league with silk-gloved hands and sanitized solutions. We asked for warmth and got something else entirely. A ship fell through our aurora, stitched from old hulls and painted with grinning symbols. It cut the sky like a thrown blade and came down hard, skidding into a drift of torn titanium and steam. It didn't match anything we knew. No graceful ring ships, no hovering tenders. It looked like a dare. She came out of it wearing a suit that glittered with frost, her shadow tall and thin against our ice. She peeled off her helmet, squinted into our endless white, and took a deep breath of air that burned human lungs and would have shredded most other lives. "Brisk," she said, and her teeth flashed when she smiled. "Love your sky." She was small as an individual presence, narrow shoulders under thick thermal cloth, hair cropped close against the static crackle. But something moved under her skin, like current behind thin water, like a storm coiled tight until the world gave it space to unfurl. Her eyes flicked across my ridgelines and glimmer veins, the brine spires that made our home. She took a step forward and did something no one from the sane worlds ever did. She lifted a gloved hand and touched the ice to feel it hum. We understood then that the one who had come was from Earth. The Death World. We had heard stories about their cradle tucked into a scar of a galaxy arm, the hot, wet world with storms that stabbed at continents and tiny invaders that ate flesh and mountains with equal appetite. We had not expected Earth to answer. We had not expected that when we asked for help, some part of the storm would get curious enough to cross the night. My harmonic array trembled in disbelief. I am Thren of the Frozen Choir. I am liaison among the Ekali, the ones who sing the ice and carry memory in brine. Our cities bloom like powder frost beneath Seracs' crust, our towers are grown organoceramic spirals tuned to the creaking song of a planet that never de-ices. We are soft, cultural creatures, we survive by being careful. We were not built to welcome storms. Yet I slid my tendrils forward across the sastrugi, lifted my foliate crest in greeting, and gave her our deepest courtesy, one note struck in harmonic resonance with the glacier, a chord that says, "We see you, we are here, the world holds." She flinched, just once, as the vibration climbed through her boots to her knees, to her bones. Then she laughed softly, the warmth of it condensing in the air like a transient cloud. She thumped the side of her helmet with a knuckle and tuned it until her voice came back translated through the local medium, my ice. The suit coughed out a polite contralto in our own chord ladder. "Hello," she said. "Mara Cade. Salvage engineer, civil rescue, emergency improvisation. You called." We had not expected humor. We had not expected the way she swayed slightly to our rhythm to make our language sit right on her tongue. The brine that runs in my body thickened with something like hope. "Where is your league?" I asked, sending the question through the ice. "We asked the Concord for a gentle trio." "Bureaucracy," Mara said cheerfully. She tapped something on her wrist, and a faint aurora of data ghosted the air, delays, reroutes, risk classifications, the cold stamp of not cost-effective. "Your ticket got moved. And my skiff needed parts." I was nearby, and honestly, I hate watching systems drown people while they process. "So," she spread her hands, as if that explained why she had brought herself to a place labeled Category 6, fatal cold, crushing pressure, fragile ecologies, unpredictable geology, unknown predators, unknown tech. I moved fast. She had another smile tucked under the first. It surfaced when she saw my choir humming in the periphery, the way our bodies arc and refract. It did not have condescension in it. Earth, the Death World, had sent a rescuer who could look at our Breathfrost world and think of it as a puzzle instead of a tragedy. "The Sunwell," I told her, and the word trembled. "The Helioseed wakes. Our planet should have been quiet. We had built our lives to fit Seracs' long winter, the ancient balance of pressure and cold, energy slow and meticulous. But there is a wound in us, a thing hammered into the lowest ice during a war older than any of our names. A seed that the ancestors of the sky civilizations had planted to bloom a fall sun, a device meant to punch a hole in the ocean and pull heat through like a thread. Dormant for centuries. 3 rotations ago, it woke. The ice at our foundations began to hum wrong. The brine canals that hold our memory warmed by half a degree. Seed crystals went blind. The choir of vaulted tallies, our oldest memory, lost 2 sections to melt collapse. It felt like somebody wrung the breath out of our world. We need it silenced, I said. We do not survive a summer. Mara tucked her hands into the crooks of her elbows and stared at the horizon where the ice turned to knives. The aurora slid above her like ink in water. Where is it? I unrolled the map of pressure and sound, tracing it for her in the way she would feel. The Sunwell had punched a vertical shaft through older ice, then bored out diagonal transfer channels in a spiral, the geometry of a turbine. It had a signature, a voice like a kettle about to scream. It lay under a calving scarp marked by blue ice veins and old battle glass. She listened with her eyes closed. A storm thinking. The humor fell away, the focus did not feel human so much as animal. I had seen that look in the deepeals that ghost past our brine lamps when they watch for prey. How deep, she asked after a time, before the pressure squashes me like a beer can. Your suit may hold to 300 meters of our standard. Owner operates at ambient subject to heat load. Okay. So through. Through and down. She opened her eyes and nodded once, as if she had had an argument with herself and won with a compromise. She took the cords without flinching, thumbed them, let the brine smear on her skin. It smelled of salt and old intelligence. She inhaled, a short catch. I learned later that the brine tasted like the sea she had grown up near, and that she had not expected the freight of grief it carried. We bury our dead with songs that stain the brine for centuries. When she touched it, our ghosts climbed up into her for a heartbeat. Mara wiped her eyes briefly. Right, she said. We've got work. We sent a cord through our city that braided awe and urgency. In the blue dark we heard drones stir and brine pumps cycle. We watched the human trudge toward the calving scarp, her boots crunching the hardened ice. She kept stopping to look, to kneel and put her hand on the sastrugi ridges, to lean her helmeted head against the vertical waves of old ice and listen. It felt like being seen as more than a problem. At the scarp, the world fell away in a glittering cliff. Ancient ice glowed blue-black under the stars where the Sunwell had eaten a column as clean as a shaft in a cathedral. Spicules of frozen vapor decorated the lip like white feathers. Dead beautifully, the way architecture drawn by mathematics always is. I sent along 3 of us from the choir, small and flexible forms who could fit the narrowest brine cuts. They rode her suit's shoulders like translucent seaweeds that had learned to be wings. We are not built to leave our environment, the heat of a human is lethal to us, the dryness of air an act of violence. But we are also a social species. We do not let those who carry our cords go alone. Hi, she said to them quietly, as if her voice could bruise. I'm Mara. We're going to be friends. They touched her shoulder through the polymer and sang a trifling chord meaning not if you die. She grinned. Entirely fair. We anchored rope. She refused to trust any line made solely of her ship synthetic, she spliced it with our beetle silk, listening to how the harmonics changed under tension. She tied knots we had never seen, a prusik here, a munter hitch there, and named them softly as if the names were prayers, figure 8 follow-through. Bolin. She taught the knots to our silk handlers so we could remake them when she was gone. Humans name their small defiance and pass it along. It is how they have outlived the things that try to eat them. When she swung over the edge of that blue throat, the world swallowed her. The first 10 meters were all backlash. Spalls of ice sloughed off the lip and sang down, tink-tink-tink like tiny bells struck by falling snow. Then the shaft closed around her, carving the wind away. The light from the stars hung above her like a whetted blade. The only illumination below was a ghostly turquoise that came from within. Old ice holds candles from lost suns. I rode along the harmonics. Her breath was steady. Her heart learned to climb our scale, quick at the start, slow into a hum when the rhythm took her. She did not make the mistake other aliens make, trying to impose their tempo on the ice. She tuned to us. Her suit and skin and rope became another instrument tied into our choir. "We have stories about your world," I told her when we reached a ledge and she caught her breath. "We sing them to our children when they won't rest." She laughed, the sound clipped by exertion. "Do you sing us as monsters?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "Earth grows teeth in soil. Earth tosses her own coastlines and calls it season. Your bacteria dream of feasting. Your forests do not take no for an answer. Like this place behaves any better," Mara muttered, voice full of fondness for the ice that threatened to crush her. She leaned to one side, knife flicking out to clear a lip of ice. "We're worse than our planet anyway. The planet just runs its patterns. We choose. We get it wrong. Then we have to live with it." "Choose right today," I said. "I mean to." She stopped, stilled. "Hear that?" I listened. The shaft hummed with a new note. It came up through the ice and through our bones, a tremolo close to the pitch we used to hold brine against the crushing weight. The sunwell was below us. It was not a calm machine. It was like a living thing whose breath is pain. Mara adjusted her descent. The shaft shifted from smooth to worm-eaten, side tunnels opened like mouths. Heat vessels, thin black veins, ran along the walls, tiny blistering errors where melt had eaten channels too fast. The temperature climbed. If our small ones had been outside her suit, they would have lost their lattice, gone soft and dark. Inside her polymer their tendrils lay flat, humming to keep from singing apart. Shapes moved in the tunnels around us, coaxed by heat and vibration, Rymeals with eyes like melted opal, icewasp clocks whose mechanical wings whirred on cables of frost, old machines from the war, inert until warmth woke their hungry algorithms. This was not just geology. Old violence had seeded predators and decoys into our bones. At 40 meters from the Sunwell's core we hit the first pack. They came out of a side tunnel on jointed legs like spun sugar, their skins a frosted transparency, their insides glittering like metallic snow. Later, under the heat of our brine lamps, I would see they had at their center a loop of code etched in nickel, each loop like a prayer. In the moment, all I saw was a rush of limbs and a wave of heat as their bodies cannibalized the surrounding ice to fuel motion. "Glass wolves," Mara said, interest threading under her words. She had seen worse. She had the hound look again, the alert that happens just before a surge. She did not reach for a gun. Gunfire is panic, and panic kills in narrow spaces more effectively than teeth. Instead she jammed a magnesium spike into the wall and slapped it into life. It burned blue-white and gave off a scream in a part of the spectrum I could taste. The wolves recoiled, their harmonics out of phase with the spike's shriek. She used the heartbeat of space to pull herself past them, legs braced, arms smooth, a hard exhale that became a wordless grunt of effort. One of the wolves clamped onto her leg. The temperature spiked. Her suit howled warnings. She cut the wolf loose not with the blade at her wrist or through its head but by sliding her tool under its spine and cracking the thin nickel loop. Its body went slack, energy gone, and the heat flowed back to the world instead of into our death. She had not liked killing it. She had done it anyway. Her breath shook in one place, just once. "Sorry," she said as she swung clear. To the wolf. To the old war that had built it. To the ice that fed it. I had a moment of wanting to hold her elbow, as if touch could transmit safety through polymer and cold. I did not, but the urge folded into the harmonics and made our song richer. The shaft broke into a cavern whose size ate sound. This is what the Sunwell had done, carved a hall inside the planet and set a column of fire in the middle. It hung in the air like a reversed waterfall, heat climbing in a rope. The walls were black glass where ice had lost itself and blind where the brine had boiled. Light smeared sideways. Sound bent. The device itself lay below the fire like a flower of knives, petals open, throats glowing, stencillatus vibrating too fast to see. Smarter pipes spidered outward, constantly adjusting to hold a thermodynamic line. It was elegant and terrible. It was also singing. We had built our existence around the gentle chorus of slow pressure. The sunwell roared like a forge. Mara crouched on the edge of the cavern and stayed very still. I could feel the minute motions as she took the measure of two competing ends, the urgent need to act, and the physics of doing so without catastrophic failure. She had urgency like gravity, but she did not let it throw her. "This isn't meant for a planet like this," she said, so soft that only we could hear. "It's trying to make an ocean it can drink and finding bones instead." She put her hand flat against the wall and shut her eyes. The heat bled into her glove. "We can quench it. But if we quench fast, we stress crack the lattice and melt race the fractures. We can anneal it. Reroute. But I don't have a pump fat enough for this flow." "You have ropes," I said, because sometimes useless facts feel better than silent facts. She snorted. "And duct tape. And a ship with a drive I can use as a pulse generator if I'm willing to strand myself." She lifted her head. "I am not leaving my tin can stuck in your ice, Thren. But if I have to, she exhaled. "We're going to need to get some of your choir here. We need to sing opposite the resonance to keep the brine memory from boiling while I work. We need to stack heat sinks. We need to." She stopped talking. The storm inside her decided. "I need to feed it my ship." "No reductions," I said. "You are what you have." She turned her head and looked right at the little ones pressed against her shoulder. Her face had the edges of somebody thinking of a math proof and a funeral at once. "I won't be nothing. I'll just be different. My ship's a good hull, but I can build another." "You can't build another you." She tilted her head toward the humming petals. "If we let the sunwell keep its hunger, it will call through vacuum. It will call things ready to answer. I'd rather my drive be the biggest voice in here when that arguing happens." There it was. A quiet twist I had not heard in the deep hum of the device, not just heating. Signaling. The frequency rode up through the capacitance of the lattice into space. No one had answered it in the old war. But now. Earth would answer, I said, the cold of that belief piercing my brine. Someone would. Maybe. Maybe something with worse manners. Her fingers flexed. "We do it now. Before the beacon gets hungry enough to shout." She pulled herself along the ledge until she could see where a braided bundle of the Helioside's veins ran closest to the cavern's rim. She measured with her eyes and with something else I did not have a word for that lives in the hands of those who build and break for a living. She braced her feet, set 2 anchors, and took out a spool of rope. She built a ladder where no rungs existed. It ran, not down, but along the wall, a horizontal spider's web anchored to the ice by 17 points, each placed in a harmonic sweet spot where our song would support the stress. She threaded our silk through, weaving it with her lines, humming gently under her breath. It was not a song my choir had taught her. It had the rhythm of waves and gulls, and a beat like paddles on a dock. I learned later it was a work chant from her family's coast, the place where her father had hauled nets with his hands until the weather killed him in a sudden squall. They have a special tender irony for the ocean, the Deathworlders, because they climb into it anyway. We sent the call through our city. The brine pumps pulsed. The choir woke from rest, and the old songs came with them like blankets. I watched my family file into the upper tunnels in long narrow bodies wrapped in thermal weaves, each carrying a different part of the harmonic architecture. The smallest came first. The bravest follow the easiest path, I teach our children, then the wise. I could not tell which I was. Mara connected a line from her wrist to the cloaks of the little ones so she could feel them in the pitch where her ears ended and my world began. To watch a human knit us into the boundary of her perception changed something inside me. It felt like we had made a friend in a story that had not been kind. "On my mark," she said when the choir lined themselves along the tunnels that fed this cavern. "If you feel this pitch, you echo it. If the pitch slides, you slide. Don't fight. Ride it. We're going to ride a burn." The world took a breath. Mara anchored the last line and clipped herself to it. She unspooled a cable from her suit all the way back up through the shaft, through the scarp to her ship. Her little skiff, ugly and lovable, purred awake. In the corridors of my city, elders lifted their crests at the sound of old engines spinning up, a prayer you could hear. The ship's drive sang a note that would make water shiver. She pressed her hand to the wall and the brine memory under it drank in the salt of her. Her voice shook on the first count. The second held. 1, 2, 3. The ship dumped its heart through the cable and into the Sunwell's veins. Nothing in our architecture had ever been designed to handle that much sudden coherence. The heat spiked, and the Sunwell reared like an animal attempting to fling you. The chant ran through us like lightning wearing a human voice, hold, hold, hold. The choir's echo came back rising, sliding, matched to Mara's moving pitch by instinct and training older than names. Our world and the humans sang opposite the wound to keep it from screaming. Mara moved. She crabbed along her web with a speed that unstitched my fear from my belly and turned it into motion. She reached the braided veins and slapped on patches like barnacles, cold sink gel packets full of endothermic phase change salts, ceramic throttles that clamped down like teeth. The gel boiled screaming as it ate heat. The ceramic teeth bit and the flow shuddered. Together with the drive surge they pushed the Helioseed's heart past a threshold the engineers who built it had built in, because even war machines prefer control. The Sunwell tried to shut itself down gracefully. It found that we did not give it the time to do so. The drive pulse forced the valves and throttles past that gentle slope. The flower of knives fluttered like a winded bird. Heat raced without the guide of those precise pedals. It found the nearest path, into the walls, into the fractures. We lifted our song to hold the brine memory steady in those fractures while the heat passed and came out the other side changed. The brine in our veins called to the brine in the walls, the cognitive salt in both recognizing itself. Mara reached the core. Later I asked her how it felt to climb into the throat of a dying star. She said, much later, that it felt like pulling a friend out of a car that's on fire while trying to disable the bomb under the seat, and that a part of her loved it and that she was afraid to tell anyone that. "We make ourselves into the thing a problem needs," she said. "Sometimes it's hard to find the outline of who you are after." At the core she found a spindle. It hummed meat soft, just at the edges of taste. She wrapped her arm around it, clicked a tool into one of its vents, and drove a charge straight into the logic that taught it to wake. It was not the kind of charge that breaks. It was the kind that sings a foreign lullaby and convinces a body that sleep will taste like home. The core stopped. Not heat. Not flow. The humming logic. The sound that had been calling outward emptied like a bowl knocked over. The column of fire slumped. The brine memory in the walls held, because the choir held. The heat flowed. The gel boiled. The ceramic cracked. The cable from Mara's ship glowed white and then slumped, dead metal. I let out a note that could have been a sob. I heard others around me do the same. We had been ready for rupture, for tragedy. We had thought we called rescue and would receive a body we would mourn. We did not have a song for the feeling we had now, because it was years since anybody had given it to us, relief. "Nobody move," Mara said hoarsely, voice roughened by heat and salt. "Let the gradients settle. Let the cracks find their new home." She lay there with her arm wrapped around the dead thing she'd killed and loved, chest heaving, body going still by discipline. We did as she said. When the walls stopped ticking, when the frost crept back and the thermal waves stilled into a new, lower hum, we let out our song. It filled halls and hearts with the taste of safety. Mara pushed herself upright with slow care, as if her bones remembered how quickly a world could change its mind. She clipped her line to the fresh anchor points and began to make her way back. It was not done hurting her. As she moved, one of the old machines we thought dead decided to be alive again. The drive's pulse had woken buried code. A jointed thing like a starved spider unseamed itself from the wall and lunged for her throat with the shrugging mindless intent of an algorithm that had finally met its conditions. She did not have a hand free to reach for a blade, her body had a braided friend on one shoulder and a stress-fracturing ceramic clamp in her other hand. She couldn't spare either. She did not scream. She shoved her throat against the thing's mouth and used its own momentum to slam its mouth onto the ceramic clamp. It bit. The clamp bit back. They cracked together. She rammed the broken pieces into the thing's throat and locked it open with a length of rope jammed half in, half out. Then she tied the rope off. "Bite that," she said through her teeth. She kept moving. I prayed to anything that would hear a song through ice for the first time in my life.